Hello, everyone. Welcome to another installment of the Kids Coaching Podcast. I'm Kate Alcock, and I'm here with the knowledgeable, of course, Jack Kitts. How you doing, Jack?
Hi, how's it going?
Good, man. So today we're going to be going over the 6 main movement patterns that we advocate here at Kids Coaching. So, Jack, let me just ask you, what are the 6 movement patterns that you advocate for?
So the 6 are going to be some squatting, deadlifting, and then horizontal pressing and pulling, and then vertical pressing or pulling. So that would be, set in what lifts they are. That would be deadlifting, squatting, and then like pull-ups and rows. That would be vertical pulling and horizontal pulling, and then bench press and overhead press would be your horizontal press and your vertical press.
All right, and who specifically should do these movements? So there are many different training populations out there, whether it be novice, intermediate, and advanced, and there will be many different people who have different goals in mind. So let's start with the goals. So what kind of goals indicate to you that I should start training these movement patterns for somebody?
So I think that first, if you're an athlete, I think that all 6 of those movement patterns are going to give you a pretty good return on investment for whatever sport you play. It's going to help, increase force production. We've talked about it in other episodes. So it'll help you increase your force production with those muscle groups and that range of motion and everything. But also just if you're just any general strength training enthusiast, someone who just wants to get stronger, just because they want to get stronger, because they want to improve their life. These are 6 really good basic movement patterns that I think that everyone should be performing.
And why are these movements important for those populations to train? So why should somebody perform a horizontal press or a vertical press as opposed to some other maybe single joint exercise? So maybe start with the first part of that question, then we can get into as opposed to other exercises later.
Right. So those 6 movements they involve multiple joints, and they're using a lot of your muscles, and generally you're going to be able to use a lot of weight. So you'll be able to get pretty strong from all those movements. All those movements are also going to be good for gaining muscle, which is helpful in the long run. But I would say you should be performing those movements just because they're what you see in day-to-day life. In day-to-day life, you go around and you pick things up off of the floor, and a deadlift generally resembles that. You push things away from you and pull things toward you, and those are things that have kind of counterparts in the gym.
And so because those movements require a great deal of musculature and multiple joints,
yes,
these are important because you mentioned the multiple joints. So
yeah,
oftentimes you see,
important.
You see in the gym a whole bunch of people on machines, and that's not to say that single joint machines are not useful.
Right.
But it's also to your understanding of why these should be, our understanding of why these should be advocated for the general / athletic population is because they're multi-joint, and your answer to why a multi-joint exercise is better than, say, a single joint exercise for strength is because
you'll be able to use more weight, honestly.
More weight, more musculature, more range of motion,
exactly.
Which is what we define as strength.
Exactly.
Okay. And so I think this is kind of something that may seem self-explanatory for maybe our listeners, but some people, we've had clients that insist on certain single joint movements for whatever reason, right? For when they're specifically doing strength programming. So why would you advocate, and this may seem like a similar question to the previous question, but why would you advocate for mostly those multi-joint exercises over specifically single joint exercises in daily life? Because
those movement patterns are those kind of envelop some of those other single joint movement patterns. So when you pull something, like when you row, you're also curling your bicep. You're using both joints, your shoulder and your elbow. So you're, working your biceps while you're doing rows. And people that are newer to the gym don't need as much stress because their level of adaptation is lower. So given that, you don't need to do as much to get a bigger return on your investment for your time in the gym.
Right. And so for somebody who says, what if I want to do a lunge, or what if I want to do something that's maybe not specifically advocated or that's specifically listed under these 6 movement patterns?
That would depend. A lot of it comes down to experience level. So for someone that's new, I'm going to restrict people that are newer. So the less experienced you are, the less movements you're going to need to perform, because your level of adaptation is lower, and the amount of stress that you need isn't as much, and the return that you're going to get is so big. So you don't need to do as much for a bigger return. That just seems like common sense. So when you're new, you don't need to be performing all 6 of these. The more advanced you get, all 6 of these will come into play.
And so which of these, for argument's sake, would you prescribe to an amateur? Would you give them, obviously we've said that you wouldn't give them all 6.
Yeah.
But which of these do you think cover some of the other ones?
So
in a novice.
Yeah, so I would obviously I would have a conversation with the person just to get a little bit better of an idea, for just a general purpose, kind of blank slate athlete, doing a squat, a deadlift, and then 1 or 2 presses and 1 or 2 pulls is going to be good enough for when you start.
And a deadlift would somewhat necessarily include a horizontal pull.
So deadlifting specifically will bring up your pulling, both of your vertical pulling and your horizontal pulling. So you just don't need to do as much of those specifically, because given that you're deadlifting. If you weren't deadlifting, maybe you need to do something different. But I advocate heavily for deadlifting, and when you do that, you just simply don't need as much of the other pulling.
Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned it briefly earlier about the different levels of training and which population. And when we say which population, we mean novice, intermediate, and advanced, which are the 3 somewhat broad categories of trainees that you're going to see in your in your coaching career. Which, as a novice, we've said you're probably going to have, a deadlift as opposed to a deadlift, a vertical pull, and a horizontal pull.
Right, exactly.
So with an intermediate and advanced, obviously there's going to be a ton of variation depending on the level of intermediateness and advancement,
exactly,
because those are such broad categories.
Yes.
So would you say that as you've somewhat stated earlier, that the more advanced you become in training, the more of these that you need or perform for adaptation?
Yes, I would say, and I would probably just go as far to say need. I would say that you need those given some certain goals. So if you're just a strict powerlifter, obviously you know what 3 movement patterns you kind of need to stick. You pretty much need to stick to, right? Powerlifters do squat, bench, and deadlift. Right. So that's obviously horizontal pushing. Does performing those other 3 help? So the question, I guess, is, does performing those other 3 help you bring up the other 3, the ones that you do perform? I think it does. I think it only does given a good training program and given periodization, and you need to have some level of understanding as to what you're doing. But on a long enough timeline, a powerlifter was definitely going to perform all 6. Someone who's more general, a more general athlete, like, just for an example, like a football player, they're gonna get a lot of use out of squatting, because leg strength is huge in football. As a football player, you might not get as much return on investment for playing football doing pull-ups. that's not to say that certain positions won't benefit from doing pull-ups, and that's not to say that if you're a football player you don't need to do pull-ups. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying squatting is probably going to give you a better aid in football than doing pull-ups or something.
Yeah, for argument's sake,
Yeah.
if you're talking about return on your investment, somebody who can do 40 pull-ups is a football player in the same position as somebody who can squat more than the 40 pull-up person
Yeah.
is going to be in a worse position than the squatter.
I would probably agree, yeah. And that differs between sports as well. Swimmers should focus a lot on leg strength, but swimmers should also focus on pulling. They don't do pushing that much when they swim. They do a lot more pulling. You can imagine the stroke when you swim. So there's obviously differences between sports, and so it requires a conversation with the athlete and what sport they're doing, maybe even what sport they're doing at that given time. If you have a multi-sport athlete,
and what position maybe in that
positions
sport.
change things within the sports. But just from a very general, basic perspective, I think that these 6 give you a really good general foundation to build a massive amount of strength and muscle.
All right. I think that we've exhausted the 6 movement patterns that we here at Kids Coaching advocate. So what we'd love to do is hear questions from you. So if you're a client of Kids Coaching, please just send them in. We're thinking about doing some Q&A episodes coming up. Because that's what we love doing. We love answering your questions. We love helping you. And those ultimately give us the greatest perspective. I mean, I'd say that each of our podcasts thus far has been a direct result of a question that we've received or questions that we've received. So from us here at Kids Coaching, I'm Kate Alcock.
I'm Jack Kitts.
Thank you so much for listening, everybody, and stay tuned for our next installment.
Thank you.